I think over time, many photographers quietly start making the same mistake. Not technically, but emotionally. If we're not careful, we can begin photographing with an audience already in our heads. And we start noticing scenes that look like photographs as opposed to those that actually connect with us. All of a sudden, photography becomes less about seeing and more about being seen. I'm fairly certain that most of you watching this video today have probably fallen into the same trap that I have done occasionally. All of a sudden, you find yourself hunting for particular types of photographs. You look at your work as more of a method and gauge of performance. You start comparing your work constantly to other people's. And when this happens, you stop noticing those ordinary moments which often turned out to be your best images in the first place. When this happens, photography has become more about evaluation and less about observation. You've also probably started thinking about how a particular image you might take will perform on social media, as opposed to how it made you feel when you took it in the first place. I think there's a couple of things you can be on the lookout for to make sure this doesn't creep into your work. Maybe you start looking at the back of your camera a lot more than you used to. You delete images immediately. Or maybe you don't have any connection with a scene that you're walking through and you stop noticing the little interactions that used to intrigue you and make you stop and spend some time reviewing a scene and maybe seeing whether you could develop an image out of a particular moment. Maybe you've even gotten to a point where you're finding it hard to pick up the camera and go out in the first place. Or maybe you've even taken images that are technically strong, they've performed well on social media, yet you feel no connection to them. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, we've all fallen into this trap at some point. It's hard not to in today's social media climate. But remembering why we got into photography in the first place will help prevent us from falling into this trap too often. If you've spent any time in the photography space, and in particular looking at photo books and monographs, you'll probably have heard the adage that photography books are made by photographers for photographers, and that's kind of where the audience stops or is limited. And while I think there is some truth to that, I do think there are people out there who are trying to break this mold. I think it's really important that we start by reminding ourselves constantly not to predefine our audience, and specifically not to shoot with just other photographers in mind. One of the people that I've come across who is doing this by combining a love of the outdoors, writing and photography is Craig Modd. And his book, Things Become Other Things, has been recommended to me a couple of different times. This is certainly not a photography book in the normal sense, but it's a memoir with images taken while producing that memoir scattered amongst the text. And I think it's a really, really interesting way that we could start to relate to deeper audiences through either our photography and our writing. So what happens when we focus less on the audience and more on the moment? Well, I think obviously one of the major things is we become more in tune with our surroundings and the people in it. But on subtler notes, I found myself slowing down more. I tend to pause and spend more time in one particular area. And the other real joy I've gotten out of trying to remind myself not to photograph for a specific audience in mind all the time is that I've become more experimental. And yeah, that does end up resulting in more images that end up getting deleted or thrown away. But ultimately, what that allows me to do is become more creative and look at my work and the subjects I'm photographing in a different light. I think it's really important to note here, and I want to re-emphasize, that I'm not against photographers targeting their work to specific audiences. But if you start out with that particular intention, it can lead you down a path where the work then doesn't become your own. And that's the experience that I've had when trying to do this sometimes. For me, it's a constant battle, and I have to remind myself this all the time. But when I go out with no preconceived notions, and with nothing in my mind but just the fact that I'm going to walk through a place with my camera, I tend to find that I am more intentional about the images I make, and I'm more experimental. Now, I think people start to go down this path for one particular reason, and that is fear. Photographers are fearful that their images aren't getting noticed, or they're not getting noticed. And so, as a result, maybe they've seen a viral trend or a particular image type pop on social media, and they make the decision to maybe direct their work that way to help draw in a wider audience, and then redirect that audience to their greater body of work. And while I'm not against experimenting or using certain trends to maybe help learn a particular technique or style, I think we have to be very careful about how we apply those particular trends in our own work. Off the top of my head, I can think of a couple of instances where the internet has gone crazy over certain image types, and then all we see is that particular type of work. When I think about high contrast light and shadow work, or motion blur with flash, these can be very, very powerful techniques when used correctly, and there is some fantastic work going on out there. But when all we see is a regurgitation of these particular photo styles, it kind of becomes boring. And quite frankly, the thing that I'm most fearful of is being ordinary as opposed to not being noticed. I think it's really important to remember at this point that meaningful photography doesn't have to announce itself loudly. And it only has to matter to one person, and that person can be just you. Before we get on to my final comments, I want to take just a moment to thank all of you guys who are taking the time to watch this video today, along with everybody who has subscribed to the channel so far. And if you haven't done so, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It does help the channel. We have surpassed 500 subscribers. I am really proud of this effort, and I thank you for working with me and building a community here on YouTube. Now, I still appreciate great photography. I love looking at photo books, and I enjoy looking at other people's work on Instagram and other social media channels. What I'm committing to myself is to continue to not let those things influence my work as much. I'm trying to be more instinctive and more in the moment when I'm out with my camera. And I'm going to constantly remind myself of one of the foundations of photography for me, which is to always ask the question why when I point my camera in someone's direction or at something. Why am I going to take this image? I think that for those of us who are passionate about this particular medium, if we all took a moment and asked a couple of questions of ourselves that I've posed today, we might be able to create a stronger and more lasting and vibrant community around photography that has a more diverse and broad range of work. I want to thank everybody here again for joining us today. I hope you've gotten something out of this video, and I look forward to seeing you guys again soon.